friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So this is going to be part 2 of the tarot / witchy portion of the Q&A that I did a Q&A call for recently. I'm getting kind of rambly, so I decided to split this up a little bit and, not do horrendously long videos. So this is going to be the second half of the tarot and witchy questions that I was asked. And then I will also be doing one or more videos of the non-tarot / witchy questions that I was asked. So yes, more Q&A to come. Hope you're enjoying it. So some of the questions that I got were about sort of my day-to-day personal tarot practice. So one question was, do you draw a card every morning? I don't draw one every morning per se, but I do draw one every day. I'm not really a morning person, so it's not at all unusual for me to be getting up in the morning and having only 5 minutes to eat a bowl of cereal before I have to go to work. But I do draw a card every day. So that is something that is an important part of my practice that I do really enjoy. And yeah, I like to keep track of the cards that I draw. Another question I got is, has your practice changed in the past year after everything we've been through? And I would say yes, it actually has become more consistent, honestly. Tarot was something that I did find to be really a good self-care practice at certain points during the pandemic. And I did find myself doing a lot more tarot reading, journaling, all of the associated sort of self-reflection and self-care kind of practices that go along with tarot were very nourishing to me at different points during the pandemic. So I think that overall my practice got more consistent. So another question I got is, do I feel that the magic of tarot lies more in personal psychology or the divine? And this is a really interesting question for me because I guess I would tend to say that I do mostly believe that it lies in personal psychology. I don't know that that's something that you can necessarily separate from the divine though. I feel like the power of tarot lies in human intuition and in our ability to discern aspects of the world and energies around us and things that are going on around us that maybe aren't totally visible to a normal scientific way of looking at the world. But that, as humans who exist in the world, there are things that we feel and experience and can intuit that aren't immediately accessible necessarily from a scientific standpoint, but that are no less real. That said, if you were to ask me kind of what my beliefs are in terms of divinity, I would really say that, divinity is very much in the world around us, and it's in ourselves, and we are all partaking in the divine. And so that ability to intuit things about ourselves and about other people, and to really glean information and meaning from symbols and the things that we see on tarot cards, there obviously is a divine aspect to that. If you believe that that is all partaking in the divine, then there really isn't a separation between the two. So if you were to ask me the question, do I feel like the magic of tarot lies more in personal psychology or the divine? I guess my answer would be yes. I feel like it's both. I'm not the kind of person who tends to believe in divinity as a sort of outside thing. I'm not somebody who necessarily asks my guides for guidance prior to a tarot reading or anything like that. I don't think that there is magic or meaning coming from something outside of me necessarily, but I do think that what I am able to discern and intuit using my own intuition and my own capabilities, as a person, the things that my brain can do, I think that there is a divine aspect to that. So this is a super confusing, rambly question or answer to that question. The question itself wasn't rambly, but my answer was. So I don't know if any of that made any sense whatsoever, but I do tend to think of, human powers of perception and intuition as partaking in divinity, just because I do feel like the world as a whole partakes in divinity. Another question that I got asked is, do you keep a tarot journal? And the answer to that is yes, although it's hard for me to characterize it as just a tarot journal. I have pretty much kept a journal for most of my life. I think that I have journals dating back to when I was 12, I think is when I started consistently keeping a journal. So I have many, many, many volumes of journal that I've kept over the course of my life. And when I started reading tarot, I really just sort of folded my tarot practice into that existing journaling practice. So I have in recent times started to do some additional tracking in addition to just my normal journaling. So what I use now is I have a traveler's notebook, and this is just one of a number of covers that I have because I buy too many traveler's notebook covers. But basically what I have in here is various inserts. And so I have a calendar insert that I keep like track of my daily draws. And it's really just like a 12-month calendar so that I can just note every day what are the cards that I drew and just, you know, take note if there are any patterns or anything. I have an insert that I do use as a personal journal. And then I have another insert that I use to take notes for videos and sort of keep track of like what videos I want to make and notes for them. So this is a little different from what I used to do. I always used to keep stuff in like a single bound book, but it gets really difficult to do things like daily draw tracking if you just have one single book that is your whole entire journal, and it gets hard to refer back to anything from the past. So I started doing the Traveler's Notebook about a year ago, and I really, really, really love this system because it gives me a way to have that sort of totally unstructured journal. Like I can have an insert that is just my unstructured like stream of consciousness journal. I can put my readings in there. Like if I do a more full-fledged reading, I can put my reading in there along with my whole interpretation. But then I also have the calendar insert to keep track of my daily draws, and I have an insert to keep track of like notes that I want to take for things like videos. So so this is a really good system for me. Like I said, I've been doing this for about a year now, and this works really, really well. So Traveler's Notebooks are the best. I also got asked, do you revisit your tarot readings? And the answer to that is yes, I do. So, you know, if I do keep track, for example, of like when I do a year ahead reading, I make notes on every day of my calendar of like what is the card that I drew for that month. And then I do go back and revisit readings if I did one on a particular topic that I can recall. I'll go back and take a look at that and see how things turned out. So yeah, I do refer back to readings. So another question I got asked was, do you have any decks that you don't like the art of as much, but you get really, really clear readings from? And yes, absolutely. This guy, the Deviant Moon. Man, this deck gives the best readings, and the art of it is just not something that, it's not that I don't think it's beautiful, well done art. I really do. I think it's beautiful, well done art. It's not what I would hang on my wall, but this deck reads like a dream. It's an incredible reader. And it's one of those decks where I never thought that I would really connect to it, and then I got it and gave it a try and was like, oh my God, this deck is amazing. So yeah, absolutely the Deviant Moon is in that category. So kind of on the converse, another question that I got is, what do you do when you have a deck that you absolutely adore the art of, but can't get a clear or concise reading from? And yes, that has absolutely happened to me. A really recent example of that is the Wandering Star Tarot, which I backed on Kickstarter, and I absolutely loved that deck, the art of it. Like the art of it was so beautiful to me, but when I got it in my hands, it just like, it didn't do much for me from an intuitive standpoint. Like it just, you know, I laid down cards and I felt kind of flat. It wasn't sparking things. And it's not like I can't read with a deck like that, but it's just not as fun for me, you know, to read with a deck like that. It's just not giving me as much to work with. You know, from an intuitive reader standpoint. And so I decided to go ahead and let that deck go. And that is what I always do in those situations. No matter how much I love the art of a deck, if I feel like it just doesn't inspire me when I'm doing readings with it, then I'll just let it go. So another question I got is, what is your favorite thing about having a tarot deck as a tool in your life? And the answer to that is really, I think tarot is a really good way to confront things if you are willing to let yourself confront them and take the meaning from it that is immediately suggesting itself to you. I know a lot of people say that it's really easy to delude yourself when you're reading for yourself, and I think that that's absolutely true. But what I've also found is that the thing that tarot makes me think of is always the thing that I don't really want to think about, but that I have to think about. And it's always bringing that up. Like every time it gets at the thing that I wish I didn't have to think about, but there's like a card staring me in the face being like, you have to think about this. And so I really like how it kind of forces you to confront things sometimes in a really no shit way. And like, you can certainly still push that off and say, okay, no, I'm not gonna pay attention to that. I'm gonna pretend like it didn't say what it actually said. I'm gonna ignore that. I'm not gonna think about it. But the reality of the situation is that if you give yourself that space to really say, okay, the first thing that made me think about was this. It's always the thing that you didn't want to think about is the thing that it makes you think of. So again, that was super rambly, but it does force you to confront things, I feel. And it also gives me self-care time with myself. It's, you know, really just fertile ground for thinking about my life in different ways and thinking about what I really want, and for, you know, spending time with my cards in my journal is just like a really great sort of self-care ritual. So I really like that as well. Do you think you can get to know a person by the decks that they use? Yeah, I think a little. You know, I think that you can learn things about what a person's aesthetic is. Obviously, like you can learn about what kind of art they're interested in and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's a little that you can learn about people by what decks they're interested in. I don't think that you can learn everything about a person by what decks they're interested in. And like in my case, for example, I think I have a really eclectic collection of decks. So I'd say that a person who looked at my decks might be sort of like, I have no idea what she's into. But, you know, they might conclude a few things. Like I don't have a lot of gore in my decks. I don't have a lot of like really dark themes in my decks. They might, you know, conclude that there were certain things that I'm less into from an aesthetic standpoint. Yeah, I think that that's kind of the limit of what you can really discern about a person from what decks they're interested in. So another question I got was, what tarot cards do you most connect to and why? And show some favorite examples of those cards. So I thought about this in terms of what cards I typically connect to me in terms of my personality, like what cards I really see myself in. There are a lot of cards that I connect to, certainly. And probably my favorite tarot card is the Moon card. I really love the Moon card. But I thought of this actually just in terms of cards that I see as maybe representing me in a reading oftentimes, or as being really connected to who I am as a person. So one of those is the Queen of Cups. I think I'm very much a Queen of Cups person. You know, I'm a very watery kind of person in terms of my personality, in terms of my chart, in terms of all that good stuff. And so, you know, definitely when the Queen of Cups comes up for me in a reading, it's a card where I do think that really is almost a significator for me. So one of my favorite Queen of Cups cards, and these are just like, these examples are just ones that like came to mind immediately when I thought about it. They're not necessarily my all-time favorite, but they're just ones I really love. So a Queen of Cups that came to mind, this is actually the creator of Vials, which is basically the equivalent of the Queen of Cups in the Numinous Tarot. And this is a card that I really, really love. Like, look at her, she is so beautiful, and I love how she has that vial in her hands and she's sort of like holding, you know, her emotions like right there and present in herself, and I really love this card. So another card that I really, really connect to that again feels like it's always talking directly to me when it comes up in a reading is the Knight of Cups. And I usually say that like the Queen of Cups is like my idealized version of me, and the Knight of Cups is the card that appears to call me out when I'm being too much of a certain way. I really always look at the Knight of Cups in a deck, and it's a card that's really important to me. It's sort of my old snarky friend who calls me out all the time. And so a Knight of Cups that I really love, and again, not necessarily my favorite, but just one that immediately came to mind, is this Knight of Cups from the Lonely Dreamer Tarot, which I absolutely love. And this was the card in that deck where when I saw it, I was like, I must have that deck. I already knew that I really loved that deck, but this card in particular, I was just like, oh my God, I must own this deck and have it in my life. This is just like one of my favorite Knights of Cups of all time. So another question that I got is, if you could read for any historical figure, who would you choose? And honestly, I don't think I can answer this question, because here is what my fear would be about reading for a historical figure. This is ridiculous, but like my fear about reading for a historical figure, like I would always hope that a reading that I would do for a person might have an impact on them, you know, might make them think about their behavior, or change their course, or maybe go on a different path, or make a different decision, or that, like, my hope would be that it would impact them in some way. But if I read for a historical figure, like the unintended consequences of that, like if I did a good reading that actually made them like think about the world in a new way, like the unintended consequences of that are terrifying. So quite frankly, I wouldn't want to read tarot for any historical figure, because if it didn't have any impact on them, then there wouldn't have been any point in me doing it in the first place, So is that ridiculous? But like, I mean, I don't mean to bring like time travel paradoxes into this, but like, honestly, that would kind of freak me out. So I don't know if I want to read for a historical figure. So the last question that I got, and this was so funny to me at the time that it was asked, Jen from Jen's Balanced Tarot asked me if I could read tarot for any BTS member, who would it be and what deck would I use? And I should just warn everybody in advance, this is the last question, and we're about to get like real into BTS here. So if you are not into BTS, like for all intents and purposes, now is the end of the video for you. So feel free to click away. But if you are interested in BTS, I'm about to like get real into it. So Jen from Jen's Balanced Tarot asked me if I could read for any BTS member, who would it be and what deck would I use? And what she did not know at the time that made me giggle when I saw this question was that at that precise time, Julie from Peekaboo Rose and Heather Carter and I were in the throes of creating Bangtan Tarot, which is our BTS themed tarot deck. So it just really cracked me up that right at that moment that she asked that question, like literally I was spending all day, every day thinking about BTS and tarot and how the two were connected. But what I will say is I would not use Bangtan Tarot to read for a member of BTS, because how weird would it be if somebody was reading tarot for you and like there was your face as the High Priestess, or there was your face as, the Four of Swords, or like whatever. Like that just feels like it would be really weird. So the obvious answer to that question is Bangtan Tarot, but it's not my answer to the question. So if I were to read tarot for any BTS member, I am a V bias. I am Kim Taehyung. Tae is my bias. So I would probably have to go with him just because. And this is gonna seem like maybe a little out of left field choice, but the deck that I would use to read for him in all likelihood would be the Fantastic Menagerie. And now hear me out. The reason is like he is kind of a really quirky person. And so I feel like he would really appreciate the quirk factor of this deck. Like this is just a weird little deck, right? Like it's just got all these anthropomorphized animals, like, it's got like a real vintagey vibe that I think that he would appreciate, but it's also a Baba Studios deck, so it's got a really like luxurious feel, which I think he would appreciate. And also this deck has quite a snarky voice and is very capable of giving you a good kick in the ass, which I feel like he needs as a person sometimes. So on multiple levels, I feel like this would be a very good deck to use to read for him. But of course, naturally, then I got to thinking of like what decks I would use to read for all 7 members of BTS. So now I'm going to force you to sit through the answers to all of those as well. So starting with RM, or Namjoon, the deck that I would choose to read for him would have to be something pretty cerebral. He really likes abstract art, and so probably I would read for him something along the lines of the Margaret Peterson Tarot, which is a deck that I got relatively recently and I haven't worked with very much, but from an aesthetic standpoint, I feel like this is the kind of deck that he would probably really go for. So yeah, that's what I'd pick for him. Now for Jin, I've got to go Crystal Unicorn, right? Like, obviously, he would get a huge kick out of this deck. So I would 100% pick this to read for Kim Sok-jin. So Suga or Yoongi would probably not be interested in having his cards read at all. But if he did, I think he'd be very much in the sort of like, give it to me straight kind of category. So I would probably just pick like a straight up Rider-Waite-Smith deck for him. Just something totally classic. if you manage to actually get him interested in what tarot cards had to say to him, I'm pretty sure he would just want something, you know, just like I said, give it to me straight, like, you know, something classic, something that, you know, is stood the test of time. For J-Hope, you would want something kind of fun, kind of funky, very colorful, very bright. So the deck that I would pick to read for him out of my personal collection would be this deck, which is basically the Circo Tarot. It's the version of it that was released as the How to Deal Tarot, which is the mass market version. But this is totally a Hobie deck. So I would 100% pick something like this to read for him, because it's full of color and brightness and quirkiness, and yeah. For Jimin, I would want something that had a youthful vibe and a beauty to it, but was also very sort of supportive and relatable. So I would absolutely, go Light Seers for Jimin. This deck actually like kind of makes me think of him in a lot of ways. So I think that this would be a pretty perfect choice. And for Jungkook, JK, I would pick, this might seem like a little bit of an odd choice, but I would actually pick The Raven's Prophecy. And the reason for that is because he can sometimes have a little bit of a darker, sort of moodier edge to his aesthetic. You know, he wears a lot of black, and, you know, like if you look at the room that he curated for the B album, it definitely had this very like modern but moody kind of sensibility to it. And I think that he would really like the use of color in this deck and the way that the art is done. So anyway, that is the one that I would pick for him. So anyway, those are answers to all of the questions that I was asked in terms of the sort of tarot and witchy themed side of the Q&A, including answers to some questions that I was not asked, but whatever. So I hope that you enjoyed. I will be doing separate videos answering some of the non-tarot and witchy themed, sort of more like regular life themed questions. So keep an eye out for those, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.